Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make 3 more Halloween costumes for your stuffed animals. I do one of these videos every year, so if you haven't seen my previous ones, I'll link them in the description. I maybe should have chosen some easier costumes, but I had a lot of fun coming up with these. Now let's get started! Okay, so I'm going to start out with the easiest one, which is going to be the superhero costume. I'm not doing any one superhero specifically, but this basic mask and cape definitely get the point across, and you can always customize it. Okay, so I'm making it for Tubby here, and here is the mask pattern I made. I'll leave a pattern for this in the description box, but I'll make it sized for a Build-A-Bear since that's more of a standard size and he is a little bit smaller. Now I can pin this on to some black felt or whatever color you want and cut this out. And I'm using felt so I can make this whole thing no sew, which wasn't the plan at first, but after I filmed the other 2 costumes first that involved a lot of sewing, I wanted to keep this as simple as possible because I know a lot of my viewers don't have a sewing machine. Okay, so I cut out the eye holes by folding that section in half and then made it a little bigger so you could see his eyes more clearly. I kept the mask shape pretty simple, but you can always draw your own so it can be any shape you want. Next, I want to add a strap to this, so I'm making a little hole on the sides of the mask by just folding in half and making a small cut. And then I'm taking some string. A little bit stretchy is preferable, but it doesn't have to be. You could also use like a rubber band or an elastic, I guess. Now I'm just feeding that through the hole and then tying it around twice so it's really secure. And I'm pulling it super tight, so when I cut it really close to the knot, it doesn't get undone. Now I can try this on to check how long I need the string to be, and I know this is basically off camera, so sorry about that, but I'm cutting it extra long since I know I'll need a lot of end space to actually tie the knot. I'll just make sure I have about an inch of the tail left over, so it'll be the right length. After that, the mask is done, and next I can move on to the cape. I picked up some costume silk for this, and not sure what the difference between that and regular silk is, but it just seemed like that classic cape material, but you can really use whatever fabric you want. What you're seeing me do now is cut out my first version of this cape pattern, but after putting it all together, it just didn't work out, so I did end up simplifying it, and you'll see later what the shape is. It's basically just the bottom half of this. But I didn't record myself cutting that part out, so I'm just showing you this footage. And after this, I'm going to flip my pattern over, pin it down, and cut that out, so the 2 pieces are mirror images of each other. Okay, here's the 2 new pieces cut out, and they're basically just trapezoids, and I'm going to flip them good side to good side, and at this point you could either sew these together, leaving a space at the top, or for the no-sew version, I'm going to hot glue these together. You could also use fabric glue. Please be very careful if you end up using hot glue, and try to make sure your background is something that the glue will peel off of, like plastic or even this poster board I'm using, but for instance paper will definitely stick to it. So I'm basically going around the bottom and side edges, trying to draw as straight of a line of hot glue as possible, but you know, clearly it's not straight at all. But it still turned out fine. And at the corners, you'll want to try to make that line as thin as possible, just to get the best corner possible. It's still not going to be super sharp though. And one of the biggest things not to do, which I'm doing here, is add the glue right along the edge. Give it like a couple millimeters space between the edge and your line of glue, because if the fabric starts fraying, it's just going to open, so make sure it's a little bit further away from that edge. After the glue is dry, you can turn the whole thing inside out, and you may have to go back and patch up any open spaces if you have them like I did. But next, I'm going to grab a piece of ribbon, or really whatever you want to use to tie this around your stuffed animal's neck. And then I'm going to fold down the top edge over it, so I'm adding a line of glue down there and sandwiching that ribbon in. And I didn't want to actually glue the ribbon in because I wanted to be able to pull it still, so I just had to make that space a little bit bigger. And then since this is 2 layers, I'm adding another line of glue on top of that and then sticking the second layer. Now this cape is ready to try on, so I'm going to tie the ribbon around his neck. And since it isn't the exact color to match the cape, I left it extra long so I could cross them in the front and then tie a little bow in the back that I could tuck into the cape. That way he doesn't have a bow tie in the front, which wasn't really the look I was going for. Now to hide his identity, of course, I can try on the mask and this superhero costume is done. Make sure to comment down below what you think his superpower should be and what his superhero name should be. Okay, now the next two costumes are a lot more involved, but I'm going to start with the hot dog. I feel like it's a pretty classic Halloween costume, and you know I love to include food costumes in these videos. Okay, so I'm first cutting out two of this hot dog template. I know the proportions are not really hot dog accurate, but altogether you'll get the idea. And I'm cutting this out of felt so I don't have to hem anything. Next, I'm going to cut the buns out of this tan felt. And I need 4 of these, but I'm only going to do 2 at a time since it's already going to be pretty thick to cut through. And as you saw in the intro, I made this for a Build-A-Bear frog, so the pattern should fit any Build-A-Bear. Okay, so here's all the pieces we need for the basic hot dog. I'm going to cut out the mustard later. And I'm first taking a bun piece and a hot dog piece and laying it on my stuffed animal. Right now, I just need to figure out where I need to cut the armholes in the buns. So I'll probably have the hole already in the pattern, but since I didn't have it yet, I'm just checking how much I want it to stick up past her shoulder, and then folding it in half and cutting out a little oval, then making it wider so it fits. Now I'm matching this up with the other bun piece and cutting out the hole so it matches. Now to start putting this together, I'm going to start by putting the hot dog piece in between the 2 bun pieces like this. And I checked this position by laying this on my stuffed animal earlier, so I kind of tried to match up the top of the hot dog with the top of that armhole. And you want to overlap the pieces about 2 inches at the widest part. That way the bun will be sticking out in the end. Now I can pin that in place, and when I fold it back like this is how much of the bun is going to be sticking out. So this was actually not enough for me, so I later scooted it in a little bit more. But now I'm going to grab the other hot dog piece and repeat the same thing on the other side. Then I'm going to sew a straight stitch where I've pinned. Okay, so it's kind of hard to see because I used red thread, but as you can see, I didn't start at the very top of the curve. I basically only sewed along this straight part. Next, I'm going to fold in those 2 hot dog pieces so it's contained in the center of the bun, and then put the other bun piece on top of that. We technically want this sewn good side to good side, but with felt, both sides are pretty much the same. And now I can pin the outer edges together, making sure I'm not sandwiching any of that red felt in between. So as you can see, I keep tucking it in to make sure I don't accidentally sew over that. Now I'm going to sew around the edge with a straight stitch, but leave the bottom open so we can turn it inside out. After that, I can turn this piece inside out. So now we have 1 full bun done and the hot dog pieces sticking out the sides. So next we need to start making and attaching that other bun. Okay, so now you want to lay the whole thing flat like this. That's what's on the left. And then on the right, there's that 3rd bun piece. And you want to pin these together basically to match the other side. So they're probably overlapping like 2.5 inches at most. Now I'm going to sew along where I've pinned just like I did for the other side. Okay, this is how it looks all connected, and now with this side facing out, I'm going to fold everything together so the 2 ends of this bun hot dog thing connect, basically. I know it's pretty confusing to watch, and it was so confusing to figure out because I just made this up. I had 0 references for how to make a hot dog costume, but it did work, so definitely just pay close attention to the video and make sure it's looking how mine is. Okay, so unfortunately, with how this is all put together, you can't put this in your sewing machine. So I have to sew this by hand, which it didn't end up taking that long, so that's good. But I just have a needle and thread, and I'm starting at the bottom, trying to match basically where I ended the stitch on the other side. And now I'm just doing my go-to back stitch. You could probably also do a running stitch to keep it simple. And honestly, maybe I should have just used hot glue. But I didn't think of that because I filmed the superhero one last. I'm glad I made it sturdy though because this was a tight squeeze to put on. Okay, once that's sewn on, I'm going to turn this whole thing inside out. And this is where it gets a little bit weird because this side right here of the bun is the bad side, meaning the good side is the side with all the stuff sewn to it. So again, I'm compressing all of that felt that's connected already and trying to squish it away from the edges because that last bun piece I'm going to lay on top and then pin the edges together. So it's really the back piece connected to this new piece. And again, you really want to make sure you're not sandwiching anything else in there. It's just those two layers. After that's all pinned together, I can finally sew around the entire edge, again leaving the bottom open. Here's how it looks now. I know those red stitches look a little concerning, but I didn't notice it causing any problems. So now I can just turn this whole thing inside out, which it'll be a little tight because there's a lot happening. But once you do, you see you have a full hot dog costume. Now here's the moment of truth. I need to try this on my stuffed animal. I think someone requested I make a costume for a frog, so I'm putting it on her specifically. And miraculously, it fit. It was definitely a little tight though, so I do need to adjust the pattern for the back of the hot dog to be a little wider. Also, have your frog put this on feet first because there's no chance it's going over their head. We still have a few more last steps to finish, and that is sewing up the bottom of these buns, which involves more hand stitching, but this time I'm going to do what I think is called a ladder stitch, where you basically do like a running stitch on each side of the two pieces you're putting together. So do one running stitch on one side, cross over, do another running stitch, cross over, and then keep doing that. And I think that hides the stitches a little bit better, but you could use whatever stitch you want. And I forgot to mention, you can actually stuff this if you want, because it's kind of hard for the bun pieces to always, be puffing out. They sometimes get smushed together. So you can add stuffing. Just keep in mind, nothing's separating that from your stuffed animal's arm, so it's not really fully contained, but it definitely would work to help puff out the bottom at least. Okay, after doing the same thing for the other side, we can finally add the mustard. But I haven't made the mustard yet, so I gotta cut that out first. I just drew and cut out this kind of messy squiggly line because, mustard isn't perfect, and cut it out of some yellow felt. And feel free to get creative and add other toppings you like. Now I'm thinking of maybe onions or relish, which would just be like little squares of different colored felt. But I like the mustard because it just obviously stands out and gives it more of a hot dog look. I personally don't put any toppings on my hot dog, like no sauce, nothing, because I'm against most sauces in general. But I will thoroughly enjoy a plain hot dog, or 4. Okay, now I just need to attach this to the hot dog. And I really could have used hot glue at this point. I thought about it, but I didn't want it to add any stiffness as I was squeezing this on my stuffed animal, so I just ended up doing a needle and thread, and I just did a basic running stitch with a very tiny stitch in the front and then a big stitch in the back to really just reduce the amount of stitches I had to do. And what if I told you I didn't have yellow thread for this? I forgot to buy it and didn't know what to do for a while, but I have a life hack I'm going to share in the next costume, so stay tuned till then. Now here is the final hot dog costume tried on. I am very proud of myself for figuring this out, but I did make a lot of mistakes along the way, so if you do this, at least now you have a guide. Now if you thought this costume was involved, I've saved the most extra for last, and maybe it just took me a longer time to come up with a design, but this next one took a while. And that, of course, is the classic, iconic Little Mermaid. A few people wanted princess stuff, and this one was on top of mind because I recently saw the live-action Little Mermaid and was obsessed. So I figured this would be perfect for Snowflake, who plays a mermaid in a little show I used to do called Ellie and Shelley. But this time, instead of just a tail, she's getting the full treatment to really transform her into Ariel herself. But before we get to that extra stuff, we need to make her a tail. Obviously, since she's already a beluga whale, to make the pattern, I'm first going to just trace her tail, but if you make this for a different stuffed animal, really just set them on a piece of paper and draw the tail you want for them. Now I'm measuring along her body to find out how tall I want the tail to be, and then later I'm going to add seam allowance to that. Next, and most importantly, I'm going to measure around her back, about where that tail is going to start. So measuring that, I got around 5¼ inches, and that's how wide the top of the tail needs to be. Then lastly, I'm measuring the narrowest part of her tail, like before it actually turns into the tail, and I'm making sure the pattern is wider than that measurement. So connecting all these measurements gives us a good first base pattern to start with. And I'm laying it on top of her to check if it's even close, and it is quite a bit smaller than it should be, so I mainly need to make the sides bigger because they're not fully going down to that side seam, and it could use more seam allowance around the tail itself, so I basically just traced around this entire thing to make it bigger. I also ended up making that top edge extra wide because I'm going to be adding an elastic later. Thinking about it now, I think I could have just left it without an elastic, but in the moment I wanted to make sure it would fit well. Okay, next I'm going to do the same thing for the front pattern, except really all I'm doing is measuring how wide that top edge needs to be, and then I'm kind of just tracing the rest of the back pattern. And those are the only two patterns I need for the tail. So now I can cut these out of some fabric. I found this sparkly teal cotton fabric at Joann's, and I thought it would just be perfect for that mermaid tail. But if you're like me and the tail isn't completely symmetrical, make sure to flip over one of those pieces so they match up and are mirror images of each other. And that's because next I'm going to flip them good side to good side, and even though the front piece is going to be smaller, you want to line up the side edges, the bottom of the fin, everything. So I'm going to pin along that entire edge, but stop about halfway up the other side because I'm eventually going to have to open this up to hem it and then add the elastic. After sewing a straight stitch where I've pinned, I'm going to try this on Snowflake really quick just to make sure it fits, and in case it's too loose, I can always make it tighter. It was still a little bit loose for me, so I could have gone around that edge a little bit tighter, but it was already pretty tight getting it on, so I didn't want to make it harder. Also, I thought I made a mistake here because everything looked so scrunched, but I think that just happens around bends like this. Okay, I turned this bad side out again, and now I'm going to grab this sparkly blue tulle that I was going to use to make like the little fins on the top of the tail. I really don't know what these are or what to call them, but both mermaids have them, so I figured I should do it. And I first measured the top of the tail like all the way around it, and I got it was about 10 inches. And since I want a double layer of this tulle, I cut a strip that's about maybe 2 inches wide and 20 inches long, then I just cut it in half. And next, I'm going to go back to the tail and hem this top edge, so I'm just folding it over a little bit and pinning it down. But next, I'm going to actually take that tulle, which I've already stacked on top of each other, and then place it right on top of that fold. And then I just removed the pin so I could pin all of it together. So I just need to continue doing that till I get to the other side. And now I'm going to sew a straight stitch right along there. Okay, next I'm going to grab my elastic. I know this seems all over the place because even me watching this, I'm like, what am I doing? But I actually think this order I'm doing it is the best way. Oh my gosh, I forgot to mention that when you fold over that edge to hem it, if you're adding an elastic, make sure your elastic can fit through there. My elastic is super thin, so the fold didn't look, bigger than usual, but make sure to do that because next I took my elastic and added a little safety pin to it because I'm going to feed it through that top edge. And it was very difficult finding a safety pin small enough for this. I usually have one, but it's literally just one and I'm not the most organized, so I lost it. But I had a slightly worse one that was very hard to get through, but I finally did it. Now with the tulle sticking up still, I'm pinning those edges together, making sure the elastic doesn't get sucked in at this point because it happened to me and I had to redo it and I wanted to quit. Next, I'm going to use a straight stitch to close up that open side. Okay, here's how it looks and it is almost done. I'm just going to trim off that extra tulle sticking out and turn this inside out. And lastly, I'm going to try this on and just see what kind of shape I'm going for. I don't know why I needed to try it on to see that, but basically it's 2 bumps in the front and 1 bump in the back. But, with Snowflake, it's kind of hard to decide what is the front and the back, so I thought it looked best to just do 2 bumps on each side, basically. So from any angle, it should look right. Now, trying it on, it is looking pretty good, and honestly, she already looks like a mermaid now, but we're going for the Little Mermaid, so we gotta move on to the top. I was thinking a lot about this because I was originally going to go with the live action top, which is more of just like a natural, scaly crop top, but I eventually just went with the shells because they're easier and fit with Snowflake's body type better. So I'm using my little shell pattern to cut it out of some purple felt, and on one of them I'm adding this little tab at the bottom. Okay, next, to add some detail, I need some purple thread, which I don't have, so I'm going to show you how to get a small amount of whatever color thread you need. Basically, you want to just take a marker of the color thread you need and put the thread on a paper and just start coloring the thread with the marker. Seems silly, but I thought it was pretty genius. I found the best technique, though, is to actually start at the beginning and then press your marker onto the paper over the thread and then just start pulling the thread while the marker is pressed on it. And now I have some dark purple thread. If you're using washable marker like me, though, you might need some time for it to dry. Okay, so here are my shells matched up. The one in the tab is in the back. And now I'm going to put my needle through the center, so that's going to sew them together a little bit. Then I'm going to go straight up to that first scalloped edge, and instead of going over it, I'm going to go really close to the edge, but go through it. Then I'm going to go back through where that stitch started. Then I'm going to basically do the same thing one more time, except I'm just going to have the thread go over the edge and then back through to the center again. I think having 2 layers helps define it a little more. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the next scalloped edge, going through the first time but still really close to that edge, and then the second time going over. Now I just need to repeat that for the last line and then do the same thing for the other shell. Okay, after that we are almost done, but I just need some straps to keep this on. The original Little Mermaid obviously just has one strap on her back, but the thing about Snowflake is her arms are pretty much directly to the side of her, so I'd have to do 2 straps, one on the top and one on the bottom, and then I'd have to figure out how they'd even connect in the back. So what I ended up going with is straps that go just directly around her arms. Have I ever seen other tops like this? No, but I had to get creative. I love Snowflake to death, but I did not pick an easy model for this costume because her upper body is just not like a human, like a mermaid. So I had to be creative with the top and the wig. Okay, so I attached the straps, just sewing them on by hand, which I think are pretty self-explanatory, and now I don't need any Velcro involved, I don't have to tie anything, this will just slip on her arms. The only downside is you can't see that she's wearing a top from the back, which is kind of how you always see her, so that's why I originally wanted to do the live action version top. But I'm still pretty happy with how this version came out. Okay, now we can finally move on to the wig. Is the wig necessary for a Little Mermaid costume? No, but any chance I get to put a stuffed animal in a wig, I'm going to take it. My original plan for this was to make a wig out of thread. Just, make it really realistic. It's like hair. And the funny thing is, it really did work and looked pretty decent, but the problem came when I checked a reference photo and Ariel has a deep side part. A deep side part and this large swoop of hair in the front. Maybe my problem was I tried to make it too realistic. I should have just left it a plain red wig, but no, I tried rearranging the threads and styling them with Mod Podge, and unfortunately the Mod Podge dried way too fast and just looked really bad, so I should have gone with hair gel. I still think the hair gel might have worked, but I decided to move on with plan B, which was to just use red felt. At this point, I was fully going with cartoon Ariel, so I think the felt definitely looks more cartoony. Okay, so there are a few pieces for this. This first one I'm pinning down is the bang piece. I'm going to need 2 of those. And the other larger pieces, I just need 1 of each of. Okay, next I'm going to set aside the bang pieces, and this is how the 2 main pieces are going to match up to create that side part. So I need to flip those good side, and it'll look a little weird, but I'm just going to sew straight along this edge. Now it'll look like this, and I can set it aside and work on the bangs. And all I have to do for that is flip the 2 pieces good side and sew along the edge, leaving that flat side open though, so I can turn this inside out. And I honestly wish I would have just done 1 layer of this and somehow made that the bang, because this point gets kind of lost when you're sewing 2 pieces of felt together, so it wasn't as pointy as I wanted. And I probably should have made it bigger because this was very tough to turn inside out. Once that's turned inside out, we are ready to put this together. So as you can see, the wig is going to have to stay pretty far back because her eyes are right on the side of her head. So unfortunately, she will have a lot of exposed forehead. But basically, the bang is going to go on like this. So I'm tucking that straight edge under the wig and then sewed it on by hand. And this is the key moment which decides where the hair part is going to be. So If you do this the way I did it, just try to make sure that the length of the hair is even on both sides, because that'll tell you where the hair part should be. Once I've sewn most of that straight edge, I'm going to skip all the way to the tip of the bang and have it angled up so it goes over the wig, and I'm just adding a few stitches there to secure it. After locking my stitch, there is only one thing left to do, and that is find a way to get this to stay on her head. I decided on making it basically a headband by taking a thin piece of wire that will bend over her head and then just gluing that onto the wig. Be very careful if you're using hot glue like me, because that metal is going to heat up immediately, so you don't ever want to touch it with your fingers. But that's the last step, so we can finally try this on all together. Is it exactly what I wanted? No, but you can't help but look at her and just know I'm fulfilling a dream. No matter how difficult I made it for myself by choosing Snowflake, seeing that look on her face made it all worth it. If you followed her journey on Ellie and Shelley, you also know she is an amazing singer. So here's a little clip of a cover she's doing of Part of Your World.
Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun. Wandering free, wish I could be part of that world.
Okay, now that is all the costumes finally done. I hope you try these out, or it at least gave you some inspiration. Please give this video a like, comment any video suggestions you have, and comment if you want to see me make a mermaid tail for a stuffed animal that doesn't already have a tail, because I would totally make a dedicated video for that. Happy early Halloween, and I'll see you next time. Bye!